The wind howled through the dead city, carrying dust and old memories. Daniel pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders as he walked through the ruins, boots crunching over broken glass and stone. The sky above was gray, heavy with clouds that had forgotten how to rain. He wasn't here by choice. No one came to this part of the world unless they had nowhere else to go. Daniel was a trader, a scavenger, some called him. He moved from ruin to ruin, finding what little was left behind after the wars had burned everything away. Today he hoped to find fuel, maybe canned food if he was lucky. Instead, he found something else. As he passed a crumbled building, he heard a faint sound, barely more than a whisper, a cough, a sob. Daniel froze. He scanned the empty street carefully. No movement, no threats. Still, he moved slowly, hand resting near the knife strapped to his belt. Following the sound, he stepped inside the building. Once a home, now only shattered walls and broken dreams. In the far corner, under a collapsed piece of roof, he saw her, an alien woman. Her skin was a soft shade of blue, dusty and bruised. She wore ragged clothes that barely clung to her thin frame. Two small children, no older than toddlers, huddled close to her sides. They looked up at Daniel with wide, terrified eyes. The woman pushed herself up weakly, trembling from exhaustion. And then, to Daniel's shock, she dropped to her knees. She lowered her head to the cracked floor and spoke in a broken voice. "My children are well behaved," she whispered. "I can be a good wife to you, human. Please, just let us stay." For a moment, Daniel could only stare. The desperation in her voice was sharper than any blade. Her body shook, not from fear alone, but from hunger, from hopelessness. The children clung to her, their small bodies nothing but skin and bone. Daniel's stomach twisted. This was no trick. This was pure survival. He knelt slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently. The woman flinched at his voice, expecting harsh words or worse. Daniel placed his knife on the ground beside him, showing his empty hands. "I'm Daniel," he said. "You don't need to offer yourself." The woman lifted her head slightly, confusion flickering in her tired eyes. She didn't understand. In her world, safety always had a price. Daniel looked around the ruined home. No food, no water, no blankets. They had been surviving on scraps, if surviving was even the right word. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small water bottle and a few strips of dried meat. He placed them on the floor between them and then backed away. The woman stared at the offering, disbelief clear on her face. Slowly, hesitantly, she pulled the food toward her and gave the first piece to her children. They snatched it with trembling hands, stuffing it into their mouths as if afraid it would disappear. Daniel felt something hard lodge in his chest. No one, no child, should be this desperate. The woman watched her children eat, relief softening the tight lines around her mouth. Only, after they were fed, did she nibble at a small piece herself, carefully rationing it. Daniel waited quietly, letting her eat, letting her breathe. Only when she finished did he speak again. "You can come with me," he said softly. "I have a shelter, food, a real fire." The woman tensed, her body ready for the worst. Daniel shook his head quickly. No bargains, no deals, just a place to be safe. Tears filled her wide, alien eyes. She bowed her head again, not in shame this time, but in disbelief, in relief so strong it broke through the years of fear. Daniel stood and held out a hand. The woman hesitated. Her hands, cracked, dirty, fragile, hovered in the air. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. Daniel pulled her gently to her feet. She was so light, it felt like lifting a feather. The children clung to her legs, scared but watching. Daniel knelt down and offered a small smile to them. "You're safe now," he said. The children said nothing, but something in their posture shifted, just a little. The first tiny seeds of trust. Together, they left the broken house behind. The ruins watched them go, silent and uncaring. But Daniel didn't look back. He had seen enough of the past. Now, he was building something new, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. A bond, a family, something worth fighting for. As they walked into the dying light, Daniel tightened his grip on the woman's hand slightly, and for the first time in a long time, she tightened her fingers back. The walk back to Daniel's shelter was slow and painful. The woman stumbled often, her body weak from hunger and exhaustion. Each time she faltered, Daniel caught her gently without a word. The children clung to her legs, too tired to cry, too scared to let go. Daniel said nothing. He knew words would not help right now. Only action would. When they finally reached the shelter, a rough but strong building made from scrap metal and old stone, Daniel opened the door wide. He stepped aside, letting the woman enter first. She hesitated, her body tensed, ready for traps, for cruelty, for betrayal. But Daniel simply waited. No commands, no threats, only patience. Slowly she stepped inside, pulling her children close. The inside of the shelter was small but warm. A fire burned low in the corner. There were blankets, clean water, and a few pieces of scavenged furniture. Compared to the ruins outside, it was a palace. The woman stared around the room with wide, unbelieving eyes. Her fingers tightened on her children's shoulders, as if she feared it was all a dream. Daniel closed the door behind them, sealing the world out. "You're safe here," he said quietly. The woman flinched at his voice but didn't run. Progress. Daniel moved carefully around the room, pulling out more food from his supplies, old canned goods, dried fruit, a piece of hard bread. He placed them on a cloth near the fire. Then he backed away, giving her space. He watched as she sat down carefully on the floor, pulling her children close. She waited for the price to be named, but no price came. Daniel simply sat across from them, cleaning his old rifle in silence. Minutes passed. Finally, hunger won. The woman broke off a piece of bread and offered it to her children. They grabbed it eagerly, chewing fast. She watched them, her eyes full of silent pain. Only after they had eaten did she take a small bite for herself. Daniel noticed the way she ate, careful, slow, always watching him out of the corner of her eye. Every move said the same thing. She didn't trust kindness. Not yet. When the children finished eating, they curled up together on the blanket and fell into deep, dreamless sleep. The woman tucked them in gently, her hands trembling. Then she sat back against the wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Daniel tossed a spare blanket toward her. She caught it in surprise, clutching it to her chest. Still, she said nothing. Still, she waited for him to demand something in return. Daniel sighed and leaned back against the wall, staring into the fire. "You don't have to give me anything," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "You don't owe me." The woman didn't answer, but her eyes, wide and haunted, flickered. A crack in the armor, a small, tiny crack. The fire crackled softly. The wind howled outside, but inside there was warmth. There was safety, and there was silence. Not the silence of fear, the silence of fragile peace. Daniel studied her out of the corner of his eye. She was beautiful, even broken as she was, but it wasn't her face that caught him. It was the weight behind her eyes. The sorrow, the pride, the will to survive. She had lost everything, and still, she lived. Still, she protected her children. Still, she fought to find something better. He respected that. He admired it more than he could ever say. Later, when the fire burned low, Daniel shifted closer to the door, keeping watch. He didn't trust the night, didn't trust the world outside. He heard the woman whisper something in a soft, broken voice. He turned slightly, but didn't speak. He listened. She wasn't talking. To him, she was talking to herself, or maybe praying for safety, for kindness, for one more day. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He made a promise to himself then, quiet and firm. As long as he breathed, no harm would come to them. Not from raiders, not from hunger, not from fear, not anymore. When he opened his eyes, he found her watching him, not with fear, not with anger, but with something new, something fragile. Hope. It was small, it was trembling, but it was there. And sometimes Daniel thought the smallest hope was stronger than the greatest fear. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They had survived another night. Together, and in the ashes of a broken world, that was enough. For now. The next morning, the world outside was still cold and broken. Dust blew through the ruins. The sun struggled to shine through thick gray clouds. But inside Daniel's shelter, something new had started. Not loud, not sudden, but real. The woman, Sierra, Daniel had learned when she softly said her name, moved carefully through the small space. She picked up empty cans, folded blankets, swept the dusty floor with an old cloth. She worked without being asked. Not because she was afraid, because she wanted to, because maybe for the first time in a long time, she believed she was allowed to build something again. Daniel worked too. He strengthened the walls with scrap wood he had found. He patched holes in the roof with plastic sheets. He cleaned old weapons and sorted through their few supplies. They didn't speak much, but every action, every quiet shared glance, built something stronger between them. Trust, brick by brick. The children, two small boys with big dark eyes and skinny legs, slowly came out of their shell. At first, they stayed close to Sierra, clutching her clothes and watching Daniel like he might disappear at any moment. But when Daniel gave them a small ball made from scraps of cloth, they couldn't resist. Soon, soft laughter filled the shelter. As they kicked it back and forth across the floor, Daniel chuckled under his breath. Laughter. Real laughter. He had almost forgotten what it sounded like. That night, they shared a real meal. Daniel had found a few old cans of beans and boiled them over the fire, simple food. Nothing special. But sitting together around the fire, passing bowls and trading small smiles, it tasted like a feast. Sierra watched him closely all through the meal. Not with fear now, with quiet curiosity. She was trying to understand him, trying to believe that kindness could be real, that help could come without a price. After the meal, Daniel pulled out a few broken pieces of wood and a knife. He began carving. The children sat close, wide-eyed, watching every move. Slowly, carefully, Daniel shaped a small toy, a little wooden figure. When he finished, he handed it to the older boy. The child stared at it in awe, then clutched it tightly to his chest. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes shining with unshed tears. No one had given her children anything in a long, long time. Later, as the fire burned low, Sarah moved closer to Daniel. Her movements were nervous, uncertain. She knelt beside him, head bowed low. "I want to serve you," she whispered. Daniel's heart twisted. He put a hand on her shoulder. Firm, gentle. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You are not a servant." Sarah looked up, confusion and fear battling in her tired eyes. Daniel smiled softly. "Your family," he said. Simple words, but they hit harder than any weapon. Sarah sat back, stunned. She wrapped her arms around her children and pulled them close. Family, not slaves, not property. Family. Something inside her, something long buried, stirred to life again. Hope. From that day, everything changed. Slowly, carefully, they built a life together. Daniel taught Sierra how to repair weapons, how to patch clothes, How to boil safe water. Sierra taught Daniel how to weave strong rope from plant fibers, how to find edible roots hidden under dead ground. The children played during the day and slept deeply at night, full stomachs and warm blankets wrapped around them. The shelter was no longer just a hiding place. It became a home. A rough, battered, precious home made not from perfect bricks or shining walls, but from trust, from survival, from love born in ashes. Outside, the world was still broken. Raider camps still prowled the ruins. Storms still tore across the dead lands. But inside their small shelter, hope grew stronger each day. And as Daniel watched Sierra braid the children's hair by the fire, singing a soft song in her native tongue, he realized something powerful. They hadn't just survived. They had started to live again, together, because family wasn't blood. Family was who you fought for, who you stayed for, who you built a future for, even in a world of ashes. And in that small corner of a dying world, a human, an alien widow, and 2 children had proven one simple, unbreakable truth. Love survives. Always. The fire crackled softly in the shelter, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the night was deep and silent. Inside, the small family huddled close, sharing warmth and safety that still felt like a fragile dream. Daniel sat by the door, sharpening a blade, his hands steady. Across the room, Sierra sat with the 2 boys curled against her side, already asleep. But tonight Sierra did not sing. She did not hum. She only stared into the fire, her face pale and far away. Daniel noticed the change. He set down the blade carefully and moved closer. He said nothing. He had learned. Sometimes silence spoke louder than words. He sat across from her, waiting, giving her space, giving her choice. Finally, after what felt like hours, Sierra spoke. Her voice was soft, broken, heavy with things too painful to carry alone. "I had a husband once," she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly, encouraging but silent. Sierra's eyes stayed locked on the flames. He was strong, kind. We built a home together. A real home. Before everything fell. Her fingers tightened on the blanket around her. "There were more children," she said. Daniel's heart tightened. He didn't rush her, didn't ask, only listened. "The raiders came one night," Sierra continued, her voice a hollow ghost of itself. "They burned everything, took everything." Her body trembled. "They killed my husband, right in front of me." Daniel felt anger surge inside him, cold and sharp, but he kept it hidden. This was Sarah's moment, not his. "I begged them to spare the children," she said, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. "They laughed." She drew a shaky breath. "They took 2 of my daughters. I never saw them again." Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. The boys stirred in their sleep but didn't wake. Daniel reached out slowly, carefully. He placed his hand over hers, not grabbing, not holding her down, just touching. A silent promise. "I'm here. You are not alone." Sarah gripped his hand tightly, desperate for something solid in a world that had fallen apart. "I ran," she said. "I ran with these 2, hid in the ruins, lived off scraps. I couldn't save them all." Her voice broke completely. "I failed." Daniel leaned closer, his voice firm but gentle. "You didn't fail," he said. "You survived. You protected them. You fought for them." He squeezed her hand gently. "And you're still fighting." Sarah shook her head, shame filling her face. "I offered myself to you," she whispered, "like I was nothing." Daniel's heart ached at her words. He shook his head firmly. "You are not nothing." He said it again, slower, stronger, until the words sank deep. "You are a mother. You are a survivor. You are strong." The fire crackled between them, warm and alive. Sarah sobbed quietly for a long time, letting the grief she had buried for so long finally surface. Daniel sat with her through it all. He didn't speak unless needed. He didn't move unless she. wanted him to. He simply stayed. Steady, present, real. When her tears finally slowed, Sierra looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "But why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Daniel smiled softly, tiredly. "Because someone should have," he said. "Because no one deserves to be left behind." He pointed at the sleeping boys. "Because they deserve a chance. And so do you." Sierra wiped her face with the back of her hand. She straightened her back slightly, sitting taller. A small, shaky flame burned in her chest. Hope. Real hope. That night, for the first time since the world ended, Sarah didn't sleep, curled in fear. She slept sitting, beside Daniel, her shoulder brushing his lightly, her boys safe in her arms, and Daniel, watching the fire burn low, knew something powerful had happened. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was healing. Outside, the ruins stretched endless and broken. But inside the small shelter, surrounded by old scars and new promises, something beautiful was being rebuilt. A life. A family. A future. And Daniel swore silently to the stars above. No one would take that from them again. The days that followed felt like a gift. For the first time in a long while, laughter returned to the shelter. The boys played outside the door, chasing scraps of cloth tied to sticks. Sarah hummed as she cooked simple meals over the fire. Daniel repaired walls, built stronger locks, and scouted nearby ruins for supplies. They lived simply, quietly, like a real family. But Daniel knew peace in this world never lasted long, and soon, the shadows returned. It started with missing things. A crate of food vanished from where Daniel had hidden it. Tracks, heavy boots, not animal, marked the dirt outside the shelter. Daniel's instincts flared. Someone was watching them. Hunting. That night, Daniel stayed awake by the fire, the old rifle resting across his knees. He listened to the wind, to the crackle of flames, to the soft breathing of Sierra and the boys sleeping close together, and somewhere beyond the walls he heard it. A faint scuffle, a whisper of movement. Not natural, not safe. The next morning, Daniel moved quickly. He dug trenches around the shelter. He set traps using broken glass and tripwires. He placed sharpened sticks hidden near the doorway. When Sarah saw him working, fear clouded her eyes. "Raiders?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Maybe." Sarah hugged her children tighter. She knew what raiders meant: pain, loss, chains. She had lived it once. She would not survive it again. Daniel pulled her aside, speaking in a low voice. "If they come," he said, "take the boys and run out the back." He pointed to a hidden escape path he had built behind the shelter. "Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run." Sarah's hands shook. "I won't leave you," she said fiercely. Daniel smiled sadly. "You might have to." The day passed in tense silence. The boys sensed the fear in the air and stayed close. Sarah packed a small bag with water and food, her hands moving quickly, her face pale. Daniel kept watch at the door, every muscle tight, every sense alert, waiting. And, when night fell, they came. Figures moved through the darkness, rough shapes with weapons and cruel laughter. 3, maybe 4, small group, fast, dangerous. They didn't knock. They didn't shout. They came to take. The first raider tripped Daniel's wire trap and went down hard, screaming as broken glass tore his legs. The others cursed and charged forward. Daniel fired once, the old rifle kicking hard against his shoulder. One raider dropped, but the others kept coming. Inside, Sarah gathered the boys, her body trembling, but her mind clear. She whispered soft promises to them, holding them close. "If we must run," she said, "we run together." The boys nodded, fear wide in their eyes, but trust even wider. They would follow her anywhere. Outside, Daniel fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He slammed the door closed against the attackers, barred it with heavy wood. He moved fast, setting fire to oil-soaked rags near the windows, forcing the raiders to stay back. Every trick he had learned, every lesson he had bled for, he used now. Because this was no longer about survival. It was about family. It was about protecting something worth dying for. The raiders battered the walls, screaming threats. Daniel braced the door with his shoulder, gritting his teeth against the force. He shouted over his shoulder, "Go, take the boys." But Sarah didn't move. Instead, she grabbed a piece of sharp metal and stood beside him. "I stay," she said. Her voice didn't shake, not anymore. Daniel glanced at her, and in that moment, he saw her fully. Not as a refugee, not as a burden, as a fighter, a partner, family. He nodded once. Side by side, they faced the coming storm. The raiders broke through. The fight was brutal, short, bloody. Daniel's fists moved like hammers. Sarah's blade flashed like lightning. They fought not for victory. They fought for each other. And when the dust finally settled, when the last raider fled into the night bleeding and broken, Daniel and Sarah stood alone in the doorway, breathing, hard, bruised but unbroken. Behind them, the boys peeked out, wide-eyed and trembling. Sarah knelt and opened her arms. The boys ran into her embrace without hesitation. Safe. Still theirs. Still family. Daniel leaned heavily against the wall, blood dripping from a cut on his arm. He smiled tiredly. Not because it was over, but because they had fought together. Because they had won something raiders could never take. Strength, hope. Family. Outside, the broken world still waited. But inside, their small, battered shelter, they had proven one simple truth. They were stronger together. And no matter what shadows came next, they would stand side by side, always. The night after the raid was silent, too silent. Daniel patched the broken door with heavy wood, his hands steady despite the blood crusted on his arms. Sarah cleaned the floor, wiping away the stains of battle, her face calm and set. The boys slept between them, curled together like small animals. Exhausted from fear and crying, the family had survived. But the fight wasn't over. From the roof, Daniel watched the ruins beyond their small shelter. Dark figures moved through the broken city, gathering, not just raiders now, a bigger group, organized, armed, coming for them. Daniel climbed down and met Sarah's steady gaze. "They're coming back," he said. She didn't flinch. Instead, she placed a hand on his arm, strong and warm. "We stay," she said simply. Daniel smiled, rough and tired. "We stand." Together they prepared. They moved the boys into the safest corner of the shelter, behind thick walls and a hidden trapdoor. They placed traps everywhere, sharpened stakes, broken glass oil pots ready to be lit. Daniel loaded the old rifle, checked his knife. Sarah sharpened a thick piece of scrap metal into a blade. Neither spoke much. They didn't need to. Their eyes said everything. We fight, we protect, we bleed if we must. As the sun dipped below the ruins, the attackers came. 10 of them, heavily armed, confident, smiling. They thought they were coming to crush a broken family. They had no idea what waited inside. The first raider kicked the door. It didn't break. Daniel had reinforced it with steel bars. They shouted threats, promises of pain, demands. Daniel answered by lighting the oil traps. Flames roared up around the shelter, forcing the attackers back. Shots fired into the night, but Daniel and Sarah stayed low, moving through the small building like ghosts. Every step had a purpose. Every move was survival. When the attackers finally broke through, chaos exploded. Daniel fired carefully, each shot pushing the invaders back. Sarah fought like a storm, slashing, stabbing, moving fast and fierce. They fought not for glory, not for revenge. They fought because this was their home, their family, their hope, and they would not give it up. Daniel took a hard blow to the ribs and staggered. Blood dripped into his eyes. He blinked, it away, and kept moving. Sarah took a cut along her arm but didn't even slow. She slammed her blade into a raider's side, protecting the boy's hiding place without hesitation. They fought with everything they had, teeth, nails, fists, blades, because losing was not an option. The attackers weren't prepared for such fury. They broke. One by one, they fled into the ruins, leaving behind their wounded, their weapons, and their pride. When the last attacker fell or fled, Daniel collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Sierra dropped beside him, bloodied but alive. They looked at each other, battered, broken, but smiling through it all. They had stood, and they had not fallen. The boys crawled from their hiding spot, running to them. Daniel wrapped them both in his arms, pulling Sierra close as well. A family, bruised, bloodied, but together, alive. The fire outside burned low, casting a golden light over the ruined city. Daniel leaned his head against the wall and laughed, a rough, tired sound. "We did it," he said. Sarah smiled softly, touching his cheek with shaking fingers. Together. They spent the rest of the night cleaning wounds, tending to each other, watching the stars rise over the broken world. The shelter was damaged. Their bodies were hurting. But their spirit, the thing the raiders had tried to crush, was stronger than ever. They had defended their home not with walls, not with weapons, but with love, with loyalty, with the kind of strength that only comes from fighting for something greater than yourself. And in the ashes of that hard, bloody night, Daniel realized something. He hadn't just saved them. They had saved him too, because standing for someone, bleeding for someone, wasn't weakness. It was the greatest strength a human could have. And no matter what waited in the ruins beyond, Daniel knew one thing for sure. They would face it. Together. The sun rose slowly over the broken city. The sky, once dark and heavy, was now brushed with soft gold. The ruins still stood in silence. Broken walls, empty streets. But inside the battered shelter, something new had begun. Something powerful. Something alive. Daniel sat by the fire, cleaning his knife with slow, steady hands. His body ached. Cuts and bruises lined his skin. But he didn't mind. Pain meant survival. Pain meant they were still here. Across the room, Sarah tucked the boys into a pile of warm blankets. They slept deeply, smiles on their tired faces, safe, unafraid, because they knew someone would protect them now, someone would stay. Sarah stood and moved toward Daniel. She walked slowly, her steps sure and strong. There was no fear in her now, only strength, only choice. She knelt in front of him, not with shame, not with desperation, but with pride, with honor. Daniel set the knife aside and looked at her carefully. Sarah lifted her head and met his eyes, her voice steady. "I offer you my life," she said. "Not because I must, not because you demand it, but because I choose it." Daniel's throat tightened. He had fought wars, survived ruins, lost friends, but nothing hit him harder than her simple, honest words. Sarah reached out, taking his hand in hers. Her fingers were rough, scarred, but warm and sure. "I am not offering you a deal," she whispered. "I am offering you a promise. A future. A home. A family." Daniel smiled, a soft, tired smile that grew warmer. By the second, he squeezed her hand gently. "I accept," he said. Not because he pitied her, not because he owed her anything, but because he wanted her, because he believed in her, because she had become part of him, piece by piece, day by day. Together, they stood. The fire crackled low. The world outside still waited, full of danger and dust and death. But inside the shelter there was something stronger than fear. Hope, Real hope. Daniel pulled Sierra close, wrapping his arms around her. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, her body finally fully relaxing. No more walls. No more fear. Only trust. Only love. The boys stirred, blinking sleepily at the scene before them. Daniel laughed and bent down, scooping them up one in each arm. They squealed with delight, wrapping their small arms around his neck. Family, messy, loud, perfect. Later, they sat together by the fire, sharing the last of their food, planning the future. Daniel would teach the boys to hunt and build. Sierra would teach them to sing the old songs and weave strong clothes. Together, they would rebuild. Not just a shelter, a life. As the stars blinked awake above the ruins, Daniel looked around at the small battered family he had found, or maybe, who had found him. He felt something settle inside him, something deep and real. He was no longer just surviving. He was living. And he swore quietly but fiercely that no matter what storms came, no matter what shadows rose again, he would stand for them, fight for them, bleed for them. Because real love wasn't a trade. Real love wasn't a deal. Real love was a promise, freely given, freely kept. Under the shattered sky of a broken world, a human and an alien widow and her children carved out something rare and precious, a new beginning, a family forged not from duty or desperation, but from choice, from trust, from love. And against all odds, they proved one final truth. In the darkest places, even the smallest light could grow into something strong enough to save the world.